Welcome to Coming Home, Thrive and Survive in Homeschooling. Today we're going to talk about maths. It's a subject that you either like or you don't. Unfortunately for me, my ability to teach or help in maths were quite limited once our children got into mid to high school level. And not because I'm dumb, I'm not. But somewhere along the line, I think in early high school, that's round about age 13, I started to lose the love of maths. I remember enjoying it before then, and I remember finding it easy and it made sense. So round about the age 13, you're starting to move into the situation where if you ask a question or answer a question, you get giggled or sneered at in the classroom, and it's just not cool. And so I became too afraid to ask a question, and I can remember knowing I didn't understand what the maths teacher had just taught us and being too afraid and nervous to put my hand up and ask. And I never caught up after that. It was just always a struggle because I didn't know who to ask. I couldn't ask my parents, or felt I couldn't. I just felt like there was nowhere to turn. I couldn't go and ask my maths teacher because she might, I don't know, growl at me or tell me I was stupid. I just decided or absorbed at that age that maybe maths just wasn't my thing, and that was that. So consequently, a few years later, when I'm sitting my school certificate, which is what you sit at the end of your third year of high school, which back in our day then meant you could leave school, I scored for maths a humbling 55%. I scored well in my other subjects, but my maths teacher for the following year, when we went back to school, politely suggested that I might like to take accounting instead of maths in the sixth form. Never mind. Fast forward to homeschooling, and here I am convinced that I'm unable to help my children beyond a certain age. So my husband helped our two eldest teens with the level that they needed to finish at. And since both didn't need it for university, it was to the level 2 year 12 grade. Level 3 or year 13 maths would be for students needing higher requirements for a particular degree at uni. Later, when our other three were teens, we outsourced our maths to tutors, and I assure you it was money well spent. What I think children need to know over the time of their homeschooling, they need to add and subtract on paper and at a basic level in their head. They need to know their times tables. A calculator is important for complicated maths, but I believe it should be a backup when you're working at basic levels. They will need to know how to work out percentages. This is needed for life skills, such as working out what the best deal is at a shop. You're standing in front of a supermarket shelf and there are two items, the same product, and one, let's say, is on sale for a $2 discount, and the other product, almost the same, also is on special at 15% discount. Which is the best deal? It would also be really helpful if your children learn how to budget. Actually, I'll say it's essential. Your children need to know how to budget. That alone is going to save them so much money and headaches into their adult life. They will need to know how to work out measurements for building and sewing. For example, if you're going to make or order curtains, you need to know how much fabric to order according to how big your window is. You'll need to know if you have to shift house, how many packing crates or boxes, or what size truck you need to order. There's math in baking, and you will need to know, or your children will need to know, how to understand graphs and statistics. Many graphs and stats presented to the public are deliberately massaged to manipulate a belief and opinion in the reader or the listener. In other words, what do you need to live everyday life when it comes to maths? Well, if you can, use everyday life for learning the maths before you start defaulting automatically to just using maths books. For example, when you go to the shop, Is it cheaper to buy in the bulk bins or buy pre-packed, even a pre-packed on special? Is it a better deal to buy a larger container? This is percentages and using division. Is it cheaper to buy more bottles? You have to use timetables and division for this. Or is buying a prepay with a discount attached a good deal? At the chiropractic clinic where I work, we have a prepaid bulk deal of 10 visits and they get a 10% discount, which is another way also of saying they get one visit free. That is a good deal for two reasons. 10% is a better deal than what you're going to get in any bank at the moment. But the second reason you have to keep an eye on that, yes, it might be a good deal, but it's only going to be a good deal if you actually use it. More complex maths is generally needed if you're going on to higher education. One of our sons needed statistics as a separate subject for an engineering degree. I've also heard a recommendation that a statistics paper is a good idea to take no matter what study you're doing. It will better equip your student to interpret facts, figures, and graphs for himself and lower the possibility of being misled. And I've alluded to that with my previous example of learning to interpret graphs with more substantial information. For me, in my very serious hobby of knitting, I need to know how to adjust a pattern size if needed, or change knitting needles if my stitch count per inch is out. And I need basic maths to do that. Maths games. Maths is important to learn how to strategically think. Maths is either right or wrong, and figuring out why an answer is incorrect is also good problem-solving skills. We use maths wraps for times tables, addition and subtraction for our younger children. They are really handy for driving around in the car and for a child who is more hands-on. It feels like a game. Sudoku and other math games are valid activities, but not as extras after their proper maths is done. They're actually proper maths in themselves. Other helpful games to play would include chess, drafts or checkers, and bingo for smaller children. We had a big magnetic numbers board numbered from 1 to 100, but we didn't actually use it all that much, even over all our years of homeschooling. The children played with it sometimes, but I'm not convinced it was actually a constructive purchase for us. For very young children, use puzzles, blocks, Lego, pegs, things like this for sorting, for spatial awareness and early logic. You can count stairs or how many leaves or petals there are, just whatever is around at the time. You see, numbers aren't numbers, they're a shape which represents an amount. A bundle of 5 clothes pegs can be seen and counted, but the number 5 is the most efficient way to write it down. And remember, maths makes the brain work the opposite way to reading. She will be used to learning to read from left to right. Working with numbers is going from right to left. You will have forgotten that a long time ago, but for a beginner number writer and worker outer, it could be confusing for a while. Choosing and working from a textbook. Now, when you do start to use a textbook, and it's up to you when you start to take one of those on, once a child knows a concept, move on to the next chapter. You do not need to do all of the sums and problems in that chapter. You can go back regularly every so often to 1 or 2 sums just to check freshness and memory. It's a bit like a coil. If you can picture a coil lying horizontally, and each time the circular part of the coil is moving more and more to the right, each time it comes back, it picks up the end of the circle and moves to the next one, then goes backwards again and just picks up a little bit at that circle. So if you can visualize a coil like that, that's what it's like when you just pop back every so often and check up. You do not need to do all the sums on a page just because they are there. Choose a few of the early questions on the page, as they're generally the easiest, and then further on to the end of the page or section where they're usually a little bit trickier. If there's a struggle at the end, just go back a little bit and pick up another mid-problem until they can achieve those slightly more trickier questions at the end of the page. Remember, the goal is to learn the subject, not do everything on the page because it looks proper when it's filled in or looks untidy with all those blanks. That is obsessive and counterproductive, and I am remembering having to struggle with that myself. I like a page all filled in, but it wasn't beneficial for my children. The textbook Saxon Maths was popular in the first 10 years or so of our homeschooling. We couldn't afford to buy it, and I remember feeling we were missing out or I wasn't doing the best thing for my children until I heard my textbook supplier telling a caller that Saxon Maths was popular because it was popular. And there were many other maths text options which could teach as well as Saxon could. I got over my FOMO right then. When it's time to choose your textbook, look for one which contains what your child needs to know for the country that you are in. They may concentrate more on a category and less on another, which means your child may be missing an aspect in your country's curriculum. Saxon Maths comes under this caution, and so does the Singapore Maths that we used for a little while. Saxon is comprehensive for US education, but not for New Zealand requirements. Singapore was great for teaching and drilling in basic sums, but it didn't have what our oldest students needed for our New Zealand curriculum. If you're using textbooks like these, it's likely to mean you may have to top up in math content for your home country. If you're using a textbook from earlier years, you'll need to check the contents are still relevant to any updates in your Ministry of Education or Education Department, whatever you call it. If you're using a pre-written curriculum such as ACE, definitely check these requirements. You don't want to get to the end of the school year only to find that you're not only short on required content, but also the time to get the submission done by the deadline. For us, we eventually settled on Alpha, Beta, Gamma math series that was written for New Zealand. It served all the levels we needed in maths, and I should have used it much earlier. There will be other options for you to choose from to teach maths. Start at the end and work backwards. What does your child need to know in your country and later for what he needs for his degree or career? Knowing this will help you choose from the seemingly vast array of options. Coming up is an interview with Marcia, a friend who eats maths for breakfast. It will be interesting to see whether she agrees with my musings. Regardless, she will absolutely add to them.